This happened in England, Somerset, in the 1970s. I was a teen at the time, bunking off from school. In those days, I often sat in a field near where I lived, which was bordered by woods. I knew these fields like the back of my hand. I was an artistic kid and loved to draw, so I had a sketch pad out. I had been sketching the field, which was sloping and open, looking up at the field and down at my sketch pad, back and forth. But then I looked up, and the field was different. The field was suddenly full of these very small apple trees, and there was a strange mist around the trees. I started hearing twinkle like music, a flute and strings. I got really spooked and scrambled back up the field to the main road and went home a bit shaken up. The following Saturday, I went back. I brought some friends with me I'd told the experience to. The field was exactly the way it was, just normal. A field. No trees, no mist, no sign of any apple orchard. They all agreed that the experience was strange, but they didn't doubt me that it had actually happened. What I hadn't told any of my friends, what I've never told anyone before now, was that I had a strange compulsion to eat the apples that was very difficult at the time to resist. But I did, and I'm glad I did. God knows what might have happened had I eaten any of them. I think this experience opened up something in me and made it easier for me to have those types of experiences since then. But that first experience was the most vivid and the most memorable. I won't go into my other experiences now. Those are for another time. I was 17 at the time. For context, this was in Texas in the 90s, and I'm male. I was driving home from a friend's house along a road I had traveled dozens of times before. I was listening to the radio on a station that played what was then referred to as college radio. It played alternative music. This was just a few months before grunge music hit and changed the music scene. The music this station played was truly different. Bands like Pere Ubu and Art of Noise. My point is that I was used to hearing unusual music on this station, but as I was driving that night, I began hearing music that was different than anything I'd ever heard on that station. It had no lyrics, just instrumentation. The last thing I can recall is thinking that I had never heard this song before, and never have since, despite hundreds, if not thousands of hours listening to that same station in the years afterward. The next thing that I knew, I was driving down a road I had never driven down before. The colors of the hay fields on either side of the road looked unusual, like I was peering through a piece of prism or something iridescent. I had a sense that some time had passed, and the strange music I had heard was no longer playing. As I continued to drive, wondering what the hell had just happened, I realized I had driven into a neighboring town, somehow 15 miles in the opposite direction from the one I'd intended. Once I got my bearings, I then was able to drive home successfully. As I said earlier, I had traveled my intended route dozens upon dozens of times. I know that road. I believe that what happened that night was not absent-mindedness, and it was not road hypnosis. I believe that something extraordinary happened, that I might have slipped into another reality and was then spit back out. It makes me wonder if this has happened to other people, and if anyone has slipped into that other place and not come back. This happened in Oregon sometime in the 70s. I was young, maybe 7 or 8, and my brother and I were out exploring the woods near where we lived. It was mid-morning, and we were following a trail through the woods when we spotted a tree, maybe 20 feet off the path. It was enormous and so hollowed out that you could actually sit inside it. So, of course, being kids, that's exactly what we did. We left the trail and went straight for it. We must have spent 15-20 minutes in that tree, climbing in, looking around the way kids do. It felt like a discovery. When we were done, we turned back toward the trail, and it was gone. We were completely confused. The trail had been right there, but now we were standing in the woods just looking at more woods. We searched for the trail for over an hour. Nothing looked familiar. The woods that we had walked through 100 times, that we knew, just didn't look right anymore. We wandered around for hours before finally coming out onto a road. From there, we were able to find our way home. But I've never been able to explain what happened that day. We hadn't gone far. We knew those woods. The trail had been right there. We'd seen the tree from it. There was no reason to get that lost. Looking back, I'm convinced something in those woods was playing a trick on us. Something mischievous. Whether it was the tree itself or something living in it, I can't say. But I've never forgotten it. And I've never quite looked at an old hollow oak the same way. I think fairies are spirits that have inhabited the earth for a very long time. I was 23 years old, 10 years ago now, when my ex-boyfriend and I decided to go hiking at a place called Horsetail Falls, near the famous Multnomah Falls, just outside of Portland, Oregon. My boss and his wife had recommended the trail, saying it was full of beautiful waterfalls and hidden spots. It sounded like the perfect way to spend a summer afternoon. We drove out to the trailhead, excited to explore. Supposedly, there were 7 waterfalls along the way, and at some points you could even walk behind them. Having grown up near Snoqualmie Falls in Washington, I'd always loved waterfalls, especially the secret ones. At the time, my ex and I were getting along very well. He was older than me, and most of my friends didn't like him. Still, we both loved hiking and fitness, and this seemed like a good, neutral way to reconnect. The hike up the trail took about an hour. At the top was a beautiful bridge overlooking the river that fed the waterfalls. We sat there for a while, talking and cooling off. I started to feel really thirsty, and that's when I noticed a freshwater spring on the other side of the bridge. It had a little metal nozzle where people could fill their bottles. I walked over, filled mine up, and drank deeply. The water was ice cold and refreshing. Playfully, I splashed some on myself and then on him. We were both shirtless, laughing, splashing, and for a brief moment everything between us felt light again. But as we relaxed, I realized the sunlight was fading fast. The sun had already dropped behind the mountain, and dusk was setting in. I reached into my pocket to check the time on my phone, and realized my phone was dead. My ex checked for his and discovered it was missing. He thought he might have dropped it near the spring, so we crossed the bridge again to look for it. We searched everywhere but found nothing. He started to get angry, and the tension between us returned. We began walking toward the trailhead, but by now it had grown incredibly dark. So fast it was almost unnatural. Within minutes, we couldn't see a thing. It was pitch black. The air felt thick and strange. Without flashlights, it suddenly felt dangerous. One wrong step could send us slipping behind a waterfall or off a cliff. I tried to stay calm and started feeling my way through the trees along the trail. There was only one path, so I figured if we just kept moving, we'd make it back. But at one point, as I reached out in the dark, My hand brushed against something smooth, like polished wood. It took me a second to realize what it was. My ex touched it too, and we both froze. Somehow, we were back at the same bridge we had already crossed twice. The bridge was at the very end of the trail, so it was impossible for us to have ended up there again while walking toward the car. That's when I felt the sense that something paranormal was happening. I'd always believed in fairies and otherworldly realms. My mother was Wiccan, and my Irish family used to tell stories about the Fae, how they existed in a parallel plane where time could twist and reality could blur. Instinctively, I knew this was one of those moments. When I tried to explain this to my ex, he got angry again, accusing me of being ridiculous. I could tell the anger was masking fear, and I suddenly felt that the darkness and confusion was somehow tied to him, to his fear. So I walked away from him. He shouted for me not to go too far, but I didn't listen. I just kept walking in the direction that felt right. I could smell something. It was like honeysuckle or jasmine, though I wasn't sure those even grow in Oregon. The scent grew stronger the farther I went, and it gave me a strange sense of peace. Then I saw small lights up ahead. At first, I thought it must be other hikers with flashlights, but as I got closer, I realized no one was holding them. One of the lights hovered a few feet away from me. It was a sort of purple-white color. I heard my ex's voice somewhere up the mountain, but in that moment, time seemed to stop. The light shimmered, then split into several smaller orbs that drifted off in different directions until they vanished. I was left standing there in the dark, feeling oddly calm and oddly blessed. Not long after, another light appeared, moving steadily up the trail. This time, it really was a flashlight. A park ranger had come looking for us. When he shined the beam on my face, he looked terrified. I must have startled him, standing there dazed in the pitch black. I panicked and ran right past him down the trail, somehow not tripping once. When I reached the bottom, I found my car and turned it on. The clock said 8 p.m. We had only been hiking for about 3 hours. It felt impossible to me. It felt like we had been out there all night. I was convinced the sun was supposed to be coming up soon. I sat in the car until the ranger and my ex finally made it down. My ex got in, said he wanted to go home, and that was that. I don't even remember driving him back. When I finally got home, I fell asleep instantly. I never heard from my ex again after that. Turns out he blocked my number. Years later, in 2022, I went back to Horsetail Falls for the first time since that night. After the forest fires of 2021, the area looked completely different. The spring at the top of the trail, the one with the metal nozzle, was gone. I didn't have another experience and wonder if whatever Fae presence was there was driven off by the fires. I think fairies are interdimensional beings. I think that they exist in the world parallel to ours. I think they can take many different forms. I think they adjust to the standard of beauty wherever they are, and they can really appear however they wish. I think that they guard natural areas and places that need protection. I think they guard people as well. I think they're basically a race of beings that have existed for a very long time, and they can travel inside and outside of realities. This happened back in the 1960s on the Isle of Wight. I was about 4 or 5 years old. In those days, as long as you could recite your address and knew not to go off with strangers, children had the freedom to roam. So one morning, I left the house just after breakfast, about 9 o'clock, to walk to my friend's aunt's house. It was a beautiful morning with mist still lifting off the fields. Soon I passed a pond on either side of the pathway. As I neared it, I heard buzzing. I stopped to see what was making the noise, and I was delighted to see the most extraordinary, sparkling, bright green and blue dragonflies. Now, I'd never been taught about dragonflies. We had no television, so I'd never seen any of them on any program. And yet the word dragonfly just popped into my head. I just knew that that's what they were called. And then things started to get even more strange. I felt like the whole world tipped upside down. My tummy went like when Dad drove over a humpback bridge too fast. Whoop! I was still standing the right way up, but I felt like I'd been flipped over. And when the world righted itself, everything had gone strange. The dragonflies seemed bigger and brighter. The light was brighter. The colors were more vivid. I felt like I was in a protective bubble with my dragonfly friends. I could hear bells tinkling, and there seemed to be a party going on somewhere. Then I felt a tap just by my knee. I looked down and saw a tiny lady dressed in the same dazzling blues as the dragonflies. I realized that she wasn't the only one. There were others, too, all of them in the same shiny green and blue, with gossamer shawls that, now that I think about it, looked like wings. They were perfectly human in proportion, just tiny. All female, as far as I could see. There were more than 15 of them, and they appeared to be celebrating something. The tiny lady was offering me food. Her voice sounded like bells. But one of the other tiny folks scolded her, and she went away, tinkling and smiling. I was just taking all of this in when my stomach told me I was hungry and it was time to get home. As soon as I thought this, the world flipped upside down again. Whoop! And I was back in normal reality. And I was in trouble. I could tell by how far the sun had moved that it was well past lunchtime. My shoulders and arms were all sunburned. I ran home knowing full well that I was going to get a telling off. What I didn't know was quite how late I actually was. When I got home breathless, Mum was furious. I hadn't just missed lunch at midday, I'd missed tea time at 4 o'clock as well. I tried to explain what had happened, and she raised her hand to slap my leg for fibbing. And in the exact moment she did that, a huge dairy cow put her head and shoulders through the already open back door and mooed. Mum was so shocked she fell on her backside. At the same time, Dad walked in from work. He saw the cow at the door and my mom on the floor and started laughing. He still laughs about it to this day. He's in his late 80s now, and he still calls it the day the cows came home. I was puzzled for a long time about the cow. The field gates were padlocked and chained. I hadn't touched them, and I'd left just after breakfast, but got home at 4:30, even though it felt like I'd been watching the dragonflies for maybe 10 minutes. My mother had been trying to find me the whole time. She'd sent my sister along the same pathway to my friend's auntie's house, but no one saw me, and I didn't see or hear anyone but the dragonflies and the tiny people, and I usually would have heard my mom shouting for me from quite a distance. I've heard of others having similar experiences, the same feeling of the world flipping, the same lost time. I once heard an experience on your YouTube channel where someone else had a pond flip upside down near a mill, but they ended up at a manor house or something like that. It was something that had reoccurred, I believe, whereas mine didn't. I don't fully understand what happened that day. I think there are many types of fairy which live in the same place as us but vibrate at a different rate, so maybe it had something to do with that. Mind you, this is purely guesswork, but I think we share this beautiful planet with many others, from piskies to knockers, brownies to cryptids like the Dogman and Chuck. I think the veil is thinning, so more people will see what we live next door to. So we need to be kind and open-hearted. What we give is what we get. This happened in Connecticut. I live in the woods in a small valley with a river flowing through it. There are a lot of foxes in the area. It was the summer of 2020. Isolation had me stirring up at the time, and I needed the fresh air, so I went out for a walk. I crossed the bridge over the river, went left past an historic mill, and stopped. I was face to face with one of the foxes. She was just standing in the middle of the crossroads, staring at me calmly. After a minute or two of just appreciating her presence, she began trotting off in the direction I was going. I thought I'd let her go a while before continuing. I didn't want to distress her or any nearby cubs. But after she made it about 10 feet, she stopped and looked at me again. I decided this was an invitation to follow. So I did. I kept my distance, didn't make any sudden movements, avoided the shadows so she wouldn't think I was lurking. But she didn't seem to be bothered. She continued to trot, stop, trot, actually passing what my family and I call the fairy trail, a path through a myrtle-covered bit of woods, and went into a field owned by some friends of ours. She continued through that field, then into the woods beyond, to a point I couldn't see. I heard her barking a bit in that way that foxes do when they aren't distressed. I decided to continue the walk on my own. Almost immediately, I startled two white-tailed deer I hadn't noticed, and they bounded off deeper into the woods. I have to say, I was still on the fairy trail, and with the way the fox had acted and the sudden appearance of the deer, I started to feel like if I was ever going to have a fairy experience, this would be the time. I stuck to the trail and kept going. Eventually, I came to this little den arch, a tunnel of bent branches the neighbors had shaped over the path entrance. It definitely had a fey look to it, but I knew it was human-made, so I didn't feel nervous about ducking under it. I did, and continued on the path. Through the arch was a second field with a little pond, a statue garden, some crabapple trees, and berry bushes. As I stood there, suddenly I was just very happy. I don't know how to explain it. The happiness just came out of nowhere, like a switch had been flipped. I was suddenly elated, and I didn't understand why. It was a beautiful day, and I was enjoying my walk, but I'd been on many walks in this same wood. It was a fairly typical experience for me. I don't know why on that particular day I was affected by it so much. I continued as I normally would have. I went about picking fruits and herbs and fungi I knew were edible and putting them in my pockets. I took some twigs that had bloated into round nodes at the joints. I didn't eat anything because I suspected that there were folk about and that their presence might explain my strange happiness. I explored the field a bit more, found snails, a juvenile praying mantis. I thought I'd spent about an hour out there, and eventually I exited through a short path to the road and made my way home, pockets full. Back at home, I realized I'd spent half the day out there, far more than my estimated hour or so. Lost time, a sign of a fairy experience. I decided to take everything I'd gathered, the plants, the fungi, and place them on a stump in my yard, as I wasn't sure I was meant to keep them. The strange thing is that they sat out there untouched for 2 months, and they didn't change. I never saw any of it go bad or wilt. I never saw an animal take any of it. They just sat there looking like I had picked them the day before. And yet, they were slowly disappearing, like something was taking them a little bit at a time when I wasn't looking, until the stump was clear. I've had experiences with ghosts before, and this wasn't that. This was different, for lack of a better word. Angels don't really have any reason to reach out to me, and generally, I believe aliens have never contacted Earth, much less reached it. though I do believe in them, as there is statistically almost no chance that we are alone in the universe. But this experience, I don't know how to explain it other than fairy. It was a shift in emotion, along with a general uncanniness more than anything, related to nature. That's Faye. Thanks so much for watching, and a big thanks to everyone who sent in their stories for this one. Drop a comment below. What did you think of these? Any theories about what really happened or what fairies actually are? Or just say hi to help me out with the algorithm. Just to give you all an update on the sequel to The Ghosts of Nothing, it's coming along really well. Just a slight hint about the plot without giving anything away. Book 2 starts about a month after the events of Book 1, and the story continues from there. In this book, you'll learn more about the fairies and their world than you did in Book 1, and we're still following the same characters from that book and getting to know them better while having a spooky fairy folklore style adventure. I'm still hoping I can release it this year if all goes well. I hope I'll be able to release it before Christmas, but I can't promise, since a lot of the events of this book take place around the winter Yule holiday season. If you haven't read the first book yet and you're thinking about it, please give it a try. I think you will enjoy it if you enjoy this channel. There's an audio version available on Audible if you don't have time to read. It has great reviews, it's won some awards, and I personally think it's the best thing I've ever created so far. So if you like my work, I definitely recommend it to you highly. The link to the book is in the description. If you sign up for my newsletter, Fairy Lights, you'll be entered in a monthly giveaway for a free version of the audiobook. It's free to join the Fairy Lights. The link is down in the description too. Plus, I post these fun fairy world headlines every month in a series I call Fairy News, so it's worth signing up just for that. If you've got your own fairy experience to share, send it through the form on my website. I'd love to narrate it. Huge thanks, as always, goes out to anyone who supported this channel financially, whether through Patreon, Coffee, channel memberships, or the paid option of my newsletter. You keep this work going, and I appreciate you all so much. If you'd like to add your support, all the support options are in the description. Remember to hit like, share, and subscribe if you're new. It really helps the channel when you do that. And please tap the bell if you want to be notified of new videos. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.